Jeff Pintabona, welcome to Suit Up the podcast.
Hey, Terrence, glad to be here.
I picked out this yellow tie very specifically to wear because I was like, the killers from Yellow Rock. We have the primary colors here. I need to you know, coordinate.
Thank you for matching, and you've also got a bunch of yellow books right behind you, including your own book. I see
hmm
on Wanted Passenger. So yeah, we've got some good color coordination going on here.
I think that so Killers from Yellow Rock, Longwood Trail both have these delightful primary color schemes on it. I think that's one of the things that I love most about what Veritas did with the whole men's adventure fiction May lineup is they made these very distinct colors,
Yeah.
which I just, for whatever reason, it really popped out to me, especially Longwood Trail, because it's got a sweet cover for those just listening on the audio. It's red and it's got the two guns on either side and the pathway, which is like the perfect trail metaphor here.
Mhm. Yeah, it's also nice because their covers tend to really tell you something about the actual book inside. And if you go to like Barnes and Noble or something now, like so many books, no matter what genre, it's just like generic graphic design. And just
Uh-huh.
looking at the cover, you couldn't tell, is this a romance? Is it a horror? Is it like, what is this? And I love that each of the books have like a unique flavor and like you know what you're getting into with the book.
hmm I think that we're starting to see a swing back to more interesting designs here and there, but no, you're totally right. That the whole phase of like the 2000s, mid 2000s to late, uh,
Mhm.
I'd say late teens, it was dominated primarily. It didn't matter who you were. Your cover was like a man or woman in silhouette with like objects or a setting, but that was
Yeah.
it. And I'm like, oh, great. Is this a World War II romance or is this a spy thriller? I really don't know.
Yeah, and they say don't judge a book by its cover, but let's be real, we all do. We all, if you see an eye-catching cover, that makes you want to look at the book. And like it's so obvious too, because I grew up, my mother was part of the Stephen King book club.
hmm
She got all the Stephen King books early, like pre-general release, I think, because she was part of this club. So I grew up staring at these beautiful, like horror art book covers, and all those classic covers were painted. Like an actual
hmm
artist had to paint something for that cover. Again, go to Barnes and Noble today and look at the Stephen King book section. It's not
Yeah.
those paintings anymore. It's all like generic graphic design stuff, and the difference is so striking.
Have you seen so they did a re-release of the James Bond books in the United States. It's like again, it's because of the way licensing deals works. HarperCollins, I think, has the US printing rights. And they reprinted them, and it's basically just 007, and in the zeros are like graphics. But it's literally just so lazy. The Moonraker one, they
Mhm.
were raked over the coals because when you type in rocket, it's literally like the third image in like Photoshop's album.
Oh my God,
And
yeah.
I'm like, that is lazy. So I am really glad that Veritas does a great job of putting effort into making these really cool covers. And I don't have Night Horrors with me. I need to still order a copy of that one. But hey, let's just segue into this. Jeff, you've gotten three books out this year. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, it's been quite a journey. It's been a lot of work. I'm working on something else now. Also in between, I've written a lot of things that I don't ever intend to publish, but are just kind of like writing practice.
hmm
So I'm basically writing something all the time.
hmm
And of all the things I've written, three of them have managed to get published, which, yeah, I'm very proud of that.
Wrapping a little bit back here, can you give the audience just a brief introduction? Who is Jeff Pintabona?
Oh boy, who is Jeff Pintabona? Well,
Easy questions, nothing philosophical about this at all.
yeah, yeah, I'm a guy from Massachusetts who really loves films and really loves literature and books and stuff. I really love the classic like pulp paperbacks from like the
hmm
50s and 60s. I'm a big fan of westerns. I'm a big fan of horror.
hmm
I'm a big fan of action, adventure, all that kind of stuff. And I got into kind of writing because I started writing actually short stories when I was in like high school
Oh, cool.
and or even middle school. I think I would write like short stories just for my friends and stuff, and I really liked it. Sometime around high school, I kind of decided, I want to be published someday. This is going to be like a major goal of mine. I'm going to get published someday.
Hmm.
And then, life got busy. I was in college and I kind of stopped writing for fun and was writing for school all the time.
Hmm.
And then after that, just work and my career and relationships and family and all this other stuff. And I just put it on the shelf and I just didn't pursue it for the longest time. And then I would go through these phases where I would start writing
Hmm.
and then I would stop. And then this past year, I finally decided, you know what, I'm just going to go for it. And I went for it. And now I've managed to publish a short Western story, two Western novels, and a collection of short horror stories. So, as far as the public facing Jeff Pintabona, I guess that's who he is.
Well, again, congratulations. That's some great output, especially in it is this book is incredible. Like Longwood Trail and The Killers from Yellow Rock are both incredible reads. They breathe classic Western. And I remember when I read Longwood Trail, one of my first takeaways was this is a noir in Western clothes. And I absolutely loved that. It
Mhm.
really I feel like Westerns can have so much space for no pun intended. There's a lot of range in a Western to tell kind of whatever kind of story you want. And I think you've done a really great job of using that versatility in both your books so far.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, you know, again, if you look back at sort of the pulp paperback era, there's a couple different types of westerns you would find. One is the classic, like mythic western,
Hmm.
right, where it's essentially a knight in shining armor story, but it's a cowboy with a gun instead of a knight. And Zane Grey was kind of the master of that. And I do like that classic feeling like story, and I am interested in writing stories like that. But the other sort of like common like type of Western story you would encounter back then was like very hard-boiled noir dark
Hmm.
fiction. These desperate characters living on the margins and making these morally corrupt choices, and then the consequences of those choices haunting them. That's what noir is, really. And I love film noir. I love hard-boiled fiction. I love that stuff. And I really, really love those hard-boiled, like Western stories. So I very deliberately wanted to kind of imitate that sort of style when I started writing, because that's what I love the most.
Hmm. You succeeded beautifully. And for what it's worth, I think you did a great job. In The Killers from Yellow Rock, especially, I think my review was that it has the scope of a John Ford Western. When you're reading it, you really feel like you're in that kind of wide angle shot at times of this is the West, but it has a good, like Clint Eastwood level grittiness to it.
Thank you. Yeah. With Killers from Yellow Rock, I set out to make something that was longer than the Longwood Trail. The Longwood Trail is about 30,000 words.
Hmm.
Killers from Yellow Rock is 56,000 words. So I set out to tell kind of a more epic story. I wanted more characters, more conflict, more going on in general. And I did want to have that kind of hard-boiled tone, but I also wanted it to be a little bit more hopeful.
Hmm.
The main character from Killers from Yellow Rock is actually kind of a repudiation of the main character from Longwood Trail.
Yes.
Um, and so yeah, my art to get very pretentious, my art is in conversation with each other.
Hey, for what it's worth, I loved also that in Killers from Yellow Rock there is a nod to Longwood Trail because there's a comment about it in the story. I was like, ah, that's good.
Yeah, I very much have sort of this intention that all my stories are going to kind of take place in the same universe, very
Hmm.
Stephen Kingish. That doesn't mean the characters will necessarily meet each other or cross over. They might, who knows? But yeah, I plan to have little references and nods to things in each kind of story. Um, I've started writing the sequel to Killers from Yellow Rock, and
Awesome.
there's a brief nod to my short story, Gunfire at Gila Gulch. So it's like it's all connected.
Hmm. Well, I think that I've talked a bit with Nathaniel about this. I think he's trying to figure out how to make the larger Veritas universe all interconnected, and I'm like, go for it. But it's good to have that like sense of at least internal continuity for this is where everything kind of moves, zigs and zags. I have joked that I'm pretty certain that all of my books are connected, even though there's the two rom-coms which seem entirely divorced from the actual adventure stuff that I've written. But there's nothing that conflicts with them being related to each other. So of course they are. It's canon until I decide it's not.
Exactly. Yeah, why not? And in my stories, the Western, kind of like you said, you can do so much different stuff. You can do the hard-boiled crime stuff. You can do the more mythic,
Mm-hmm.
almost King Arthurian style of story.
Mm-hmm.
You can do whatever, and it all kind of fits. The West was a huge place with a massive cast of characters in real life. Tons of different stories, some of which were very gritty and tough, some of which were heroic and inspiring. So yeah, you can absolutely, especially because all the Veritas books span such different periods of time,
Yes.
different countries, different places. Like, yeah, you can do whatever you want.
I think that's one of the things that I enjoy about Louis L'Amour's is with the I think it's the Chantries, the Talons, and the Sackets. He
Yes.
has like these three families kind of cross paths every now and again. And
Hmm.
that has always just struck me as this interesting seeing how the he used it to really explain this is the American story in a lot of ways, where start in Europe and work our way into this frontier across different frontiers because we had all those phases. Is there any specific type of genre in the West that you want to experiment with that you haven't yet?
Yeah, I mean, I want to do all of it. I
Right
want to
answer.
do stuff about the Indian Wars. Um, I want to do, the town tamer type story, which I'm interested in sort of incorporating into the sequel to Killers from
Hmm.
Yellow Rock. Um, I'm writing something now, actually, that is not the sequel to Killers from Yellow Rock. I'm writing something else while I'm doing that called Range Assassin.
Ooh.
Um, yeah, which is a very hard-boiled story that's about the classic range wars,
Hmm.
between different ranchers fighting for land and money and cattle and all this sort of stuff. So yeah, there's not a single like type of story in the West that I don't find interesting and that I'm not interested in kind of putting my own stamp on.
I one of my former boss's friends, he randomly enough grew up in California. He was friends with guy that was a co-creator on Rockford Files. I'm trying to
Okay.
remember what his name is, but he one of those really well-known TV detective authors.
Yep.
He was at the dinner table has made a comment about if you said anything in the West, it instantly raises it up a level just because the stakes change because you can it's the whole like Seven Samurai thing turns into Magnificent Seven. You can really give it just this interesting texture that elevates the story. And so I love the fact that with the West you have this full tapestry, this whole range, excuse me, no pun intended again, range of colors that you can use to draw out the different aspects of your characters.
Yeah, 100%. In the actual Old West, there was, kind of unmitigated freedom in a lot of ways for people
Hmm.
to behave really kind of however they wanted. If you do research on the actual Old West, it's full of these bizarre characters. Some people in the real life Old West took advantage of that to behave in ways we would regard as insane. So it's so colorful and interesting, and yeah, I saw one of the podcasts you were talking to somebody about like when there's a lot of technology, it kind of constrains
Hmm.
that sense of adventure
Yes.
and that sense of like an open world that you have to go explore. It's like, oh, you have the technology, you can like, what is that place? It's on Google Maps. I don't know. I'll look it up. It's like when you don't have that and the characters have to go exploring and find these
Hmm.
places, it's so much more interesting. It's so much more flavorful, and I think it's more fun. I'm not opposed to writing something like in the modern day, but I have two history degrees and I really like writing historical fiction.
Do you have a specific period in history that if outside of the West, is there a period in history that you want to explore?
Yes. So I am one of these ideas that I was talking to Nathaniel about, and I actually have a book to help me do some research on it, is the Korean War,
Oh, which is very
sometimes known as America's
unexplored.
Forgotten War.
Yes, it's a very under like utilized section of like historical fiction here.
What's really interesting about it is, and speaking of James Bond, is after World War II, like all these different major world powers really,
Hmm.
really invested a lot of time and money into their intelligence services and agencies.
Hmm.
And the crazy thing about the Korean War, and that's actually what this book, Devil's Shadow, is about. During the Korean War, you had multiple American intelligence agencies, you had British, French, you had
Hmm.
all these different intelligence agencies, the Soviets, the Chinese. they were all operating in Korea, and almost none of them were talking to each other or coordinating on their operations. Even ones
Hmm.
that were allied with each other just didn't trust or talk to the others. So
Hmm.
you have tons of these crazy covert ops being done with no one like being in the loop about it. It's so interesting to me, and I have a ton of ideas about like stuff you could do with that.
Hmm. No, and it's fascinating just because this is also the first time that like America is a superpower at this point. And it's like the Korean War, they're like starting to go, look, we've got these muscles. We can do these things. And so you have this fascinating like post World War II victory lap that the Allies feel like they can run. And so everyone is walking into this with a bit of a chip on their shoulder, especially with their intelligence services. So I'm looking forward to, first of all, the book sounds amazing. I'm definitely going to have to get a copy for myself to read, but I'm looking forward to seeing what you do with that because really fascinating era, time, and situation.
Yeah, you know, once I'm done my current like two projects that I'm supposed to be working on right now, I do want to explore that. I think the Korean War is kind of interesting. I have this idea about these two guys that are operating deep behind enemy lines in North Korea, but then the lines sort of stabilize at the 38th
Hmm.
parallel, and they have to try and get below
Hmm.
because they've basically been abandoned. The US is like, we're not going in to get you guys now. So that's kind of an idea that I'm exploring. And yeah, once I read that book and get a better sense of what all these operations were and who was doing
Hmm.
what and who was not talking to who that probably should have been, it'll, I think, give me a lot more of the background that I need.
Hmm.
Um, I was going to mention another genre that I'm interested in doing is pirate fiction,
Ooh,
uh,
yes. Would love
which
to
is
hear more about that.
underutilized. Massively underutilized. There's not there's if you actually try to look outside of Treasure Island or Michael Crichton's Pirate Latitudes, if you try to look for like pirate books, like novels, there's not a lot.
Captain Blood,
Yep.
and then you're right, Treasure Island. And yeah, I didn't know Michael Crichton had a pirate book. I'll have to look that one up.
Pirate Latitudes, yeah. The manuscript was found on his computer after his death, so it was published, posthumously.
Posthumously.
There's some debate over, was it completely finished and edited when he died? Some people think it's a bit choppy. I have to say, I really liked the book. I
Okay.
thought it was great.
I mean, even
Um,
lesser Michael Crichton is still miles ahead of what a lot of people are, and I would still want to read it.
yeah, and what's interesting to me about the pirate genre is the same thing that draws me to the Western. It really is the same
Hmm.
thing. It's the unmitigated freedom of the open sea.
Hmm.
There's good characters, there's bad characters. You can tell tough, hard-boiled stories. You can tell more mythic stories. To me, as a tapestry for storytelling, it's just as interesting as the Wild West, and it has not really been utilized that much. Even
Hmm.
after the success of something like Pirates of the Caribbean, which came
Yeah.
out when we were kids, that was a massive success. And still, there's not a lot out there.
Hmm.
And I have a ton of ideas for that as well, which I'll maybe get to when I'm done my 3 or 4 projects I have ahead of that in line.
So I'm curious because I know what my process is. I'm curious if you have a similar one or a different one. When you have ideas for stories, how do you kind of like collect them or organize your priorities of this is what I want to work on versus that?
So, to be honest, it's sort of cluttered. Here's how it tends to work for me, and bear in mind, this might sound completely insane. I get ideas for stories all the time.
Hmm.
And I have a drive of like Google Docs that I just write down story ideas in. Some of those Google Docs are 17 pages long worth of outlines, character ideas, all sorts of stuff. Some of them are literally a sentence like, what if this happened? It's all over the place and it's madness. But what will spur me to start actually working on a story is when I will see the story playing out in my head like a film.
Hmm.
So I won't be thinking to myself consciously, oh, this character could do this and then that character do this. I see the characters doing that.
Hmm.
That's what happened kind of with Longwood Trail, and that's what happened with Killers from Yellow Rock. With the Killers from Yellow Rock, I was thinking of stories and stuff, and suddenly I had this vision in my head of a gunfighter climbing a mountain to try and kill another gunfighter who's up there with a price on his head. He encounters a mentally challenged man who warns him, like, that guy's going to kill you. He's killed like 19 other people. He gets up there, there's a gunfight, and our man loses. The gunfighter at the top of the mountain kills him, walks up to him as he's wounded, and before he finishes him off, he says to him, if it's any consolation, you came the closest. and then shoots him right between the eyes. I saw that play out in my head like a film, and I started writing, and everything sprang from there.
Hmm. That one visual moment is all you really need to get that jump start to keep going. The project I'm working on now, this is like the fourth rewrite I've done on it. Keep trying to nail what is the thing. And I have the scene that inspired everything, like standing there in distance going, that has remained unchanged. But the way to get to it has just adjusted so many times. But because that one scene is so strong in my head, I haven't given up on it. And it's so cool to have that eureka moment where everything clicks into place.
Yeah, it's like James Cameron, he wrote Terminator because he had a nightmare in which he was in like a burning building or something, and suddenly out of the flames came this robot skeleton thing that was after him, and it scared the crap out of him. He woke up from that and said, I have to put this in a story or a movie. And he wrote an entire script, an amazing script, just to have that moment where the metal skeleton comes out of the fire and comes after people. That's that one scene really inspired that entire film.
Hmm. Talking about horror a little bit here, it's really impressive that you have these two westerns that are fantastic, but then you also came out with night horrors this last year. Tell me a little bit about what kind of brought that short story collection of horror fiction together. Because I also want to shout out that I love that it's not just the slasher horror that I think most people associate with it. It's genuinely what is that thing that scares us in the night type stories.
Yeah, so I was a monster kid as a kid, 100%. I was obsessed with Dracula, Frankenstein, the Wolfman, all the Universal monsters, obsessed. I had them on DVD. There was in like the late 90s, early 2000s, Universal released a series of like young adult books where the
Ooh.
premise is these teenagers get this new 3D technology thing and they're watching the classic monster movies on them. And then it gets like struck by lightning and the monsters come to life out of the TV and they have to hunt them down and put them back in the movies. It's like a young adult book, but I read those books over and over again. I was obsessed with them. I
Hmm.
had the great illustrated classics version of Dracula and Frankenstein. The great
Yes.
illustrated classics version of The Invisible Man was the first book
Oh,
I ever read when I was like 5. That was like a book.
those are great books. Just
Yeah.
as a quick moment, anyone that is considering getting great illustrated classics for their kids, get them because it is a gateway to reading and good literature.
Mhm. Yeah, 100%. I had all those great illustrated classics books. Treasure Island, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, Moby Dick. I had
Mm.
them all.
I think that set me up for liking the pulp covers
Mhm.
because they just had those beautiful illustrated covers.
Yeah, those beautiful paintings, 100%. Yeah, so I was a big monster kid. The 1999 Mummy movie with Brendan Fraser, I watched over and over again as a kid. I was obsessed with. I still am. It's my second favorite film of all time. So
Ooh,
I'm
wait,
obsessed with these.
I'm
What's
interrupting
that?
you multiple times. I'm sorry, but you keep saying things I have to ask questions for. If The Mummy is your second favorite film of all time, what is your number one?
Jaws.
Oh.
Speaking of horror and monster movies, Jaws, I have seen probably more times than any other film. It is my favorite film of all time, and I think it is a perfect film.
Okay. I have not yet seen Jaws. True story. It's one of
Really?
those, it's so culturally like known. There's a handful of movies like Jaws, The Matrix I haven't seen because I've heard so much about them and know so much about them just from pop culture. Uh,
Osmosis, yeah.
Jeff, shouting it out now. We are going to do a Jaws episode of the podcast in 2026. You're going to come on it. I'll put it in my notes for the next year.
Absolutely. I would love to do that. I love Jaws, and I could talk about it, trust me, all day. Huge fan. But yeah, so I was a monster kid, to sum it up. I love classic monsters. I love the slasher stuff too. Freddy, Jason, Michael Myers. I have all those movies
Hmm.
on Blu-ray. I have a massive Blu-ray collection of horror films, all sorts of stuff. So I love this stuff. And as an adult, I got into H.P. Lovecraft and
Hmm.
cosmic horror.
Hmm.
And I loved it. I loved H.P. Lovecraft's style of writing. It's a very antiquarian, old-fashioned style of writing,
Hmm.
which he got some criticism for even when he was writing. Like even in the 20s, people were like, bro, this is like very like old man talk. Like, why are you writing like this? But I love it. I'm a history guy. I'm an antiquarian at heart. Of course I love that. And I love his stories. And I had this idea of, I'm desperate to put my spin on the classic monsters. I just love them so much. And I really feel that Universal has not really done a good job handling them in the last 15 years or so.
So,
So I have all
question
these
then.
ideas, and I decided I'm gonna do like my version of those
Hmm.
characters with Lovecraft's like style of writing, and
Okay.
that's where notorious came from.
Invisible Man, the new one. Thumbs up, thumbs down.
Okay, so that's the exception.
Yeah, because I
But
feel like that is the exception of.
yeah, I tend to think that was more the influence of like James Wan and Lee
Hmm.
Winnell and Jason Blum than Universal. It's very
Yeah.
obvious to me, frankly, that the Universal executives have no idea what to do with these characters. They just don't.
Yeah.
And they brought in Jason Blum, which is good because yeah, I actually love the new Invisible Man. I think it's a fantastic film.
Hmm.
But it's also I think pretty telling and pretty sad that they needed Jason Blum to come in and tell them how to make a movie.
Yeah. The shocking thing is realizing I just watched a great retrospective on MGM and its history. And I think that very similarly, Universal has the same struggle as any of the older studios, I think, generally speaking, struggles with a sense of identity today. And
Yeah.
what is it that people actually want instead of reacting to, oh, this seems to be big, and then completely missing the point on why people liked whatever that movie was that was successful.
Yeah, I mean, I love the Brendan Fraser mummy movies. I love the first two.
Hmm.
The second one is much more action heavy, and I don't think the script is not as tight as the first one, but I still love it. CGI rock and all. I
Yes.
love it. The third one I do not like at all. I'm excited, cautiously optimistic, I'll say, for the fourth one,
Hmm.
because
Who
they're
was
bringing back the
the
original cast.
to bring back the original cast? Then who was they talked about who's attached to it for direction, and I think that it was someone that was pretty good if I
Yes,
remember
it's
right.
Radio Silence. It's the guys that
Yes.
revised Scream.
Yes.
Which the revived Scream movies are not perfect, but I do like them a lot.
Hmm.
I don't quite love them, but I do like them a lot. I do think they are well-made films. They have some flaws, but they are well-made. So again, I'm cautiously optimistic. I also really liked Ready or Not that those guys made, which is
Oh.
a good film.
Hmm. Yeah.
So, but here's the thing, Universal tried making The Mummy with Tom Cruise, and they tried to make it into like a Marvel style
Mhm.
thing, and it was just awful. It was so awful. And I was just like, oh my God. And then Dracula Untold, same thing. And I was like, oh my God, like these characters are not superheroes.
Yeah.
The classic iconic archetypes. And I'm about to get on my soapbox a little bit here.
Please do.
But as I complain to my friends all the time, it's like, those classic characters, Dracula, Frankenstein, Mummy, Wolfman, whatever, you cannot buy the cultural cachet that those characters have. Look around in October. Look at all the Halloween
Hmm.
decorations. How many of them are ripping off Universal's designs, right? It's a Frankenstein that has bolts often in his head instead of his neck so they don't get sued. But
Hmm.
he has the green skin, he has the scar. You have a Dracula with like bright red eyes and whatever, which is more like the Hammer one. But other than that, he looks like Bela Lugosi's Dracula. You have a mummy and a werewolf. And why are those characters grouped together? Because of Universal, because of Hammer, because of the way they put those characters together. It's like those characters have infiltrated pop culture and become such a part of the Halloween season, especially. It's just like they're
Hmm.
so iconic. Even though most people haven't even seen the original films now, it's like those characters, like you said, pop culture osmosis, those characters are in our heads, especially in October. And it's like, if those Universal executives knew what they were doing, they would take advantage of that. And in my opinion, Invisible Man aside, they largely haven't done that. And I think that's sad.
Hmm. I remember hearing someone pitch what the sequels to The Mummy with Brendan Fraser should have been, and I can't get out of my mind because it just sounds so cool. After The Mummy, get Brendan Fraser and Rachel Weisz, just like each movie, they're fighting a different Universal monster. And I'm like, uh, why does this not already exist as something else? Like they could have countless times just taken that formula and tried doing it that way. We did not need Van Helsing.
No, and I'm going to say, again, speaking of flawed movies, I'm a defender of Van Helsing.
That's
Uh,
okay. Hugh
I like the
Jackman is
film.
fun.
Yeah, I agree. It's fun. It's over the top. It's a very flawed film, but you know what? I have a good time with it.
Hmm.
I like it. Um, And yeah, something along those lines, just with Rick and Evie, would be great, and I would love to see that. You know, that's the thing is, you can do fun stuff with the characters. It doesn't have to be grim, dark horror. It can be fun. I'm fine with
Hmm.
that. The Mummy movies are fun. Van Helsing is fun.
Hmm.
I'm fine with that, but it's just I think the studio needs to lean into the fact that these are monsters. These are horror
Yes.
characters. They are not Marvel superheroes who are going to make
Hmm.
quips while they save the world. It's like, come on, man. And
I
that's what they don't seem to get.
I think that it's just again the cultural everyone wants to be a superhero because superheroes
Yeah.
make money. The problem is now the snake is eating its own tail. And I, I don't know, the last time I went to see a Marvel movie was maybe No Way Home, and I'm not probably the only person out there that is in that position where it's just there hasn't been anything of interest. But
Yeah, I haven't watched a Marvel movie in years.
that's why I really like that we're getting some good fiction. Like, not only, I think that there's some really great books out right now in general, but Veritas has been doing a good job of keeping some fun adventure stories, good Western fiction getting published.
Yeah, when I wrote Night Horrors, my very much intention was that these characters are monsters.
Hmm.
That's not to say there's not an element of like fun and adventure in my story, Night Horrors. There is, but these characters are monsters and they're killers.
Hmm.
And if they catch the main character, they're going to kill him horrifically. And I
Hmm.
try to be very clear about that. Again, that sort of cosmic horror of Lovecraft, where you're encountering this unknown thing. And I think that's what we need more of. I will just say I did watch Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein
How
last
was
night.
it?
I loved it.
Okay, I've heard
I
that it's really
loved it.
good.
It's great. It's great. I will also shout out actually Robert Eggers' Nosferatu, great.
Hmm.
Can't wait for his werewolf movie. And Last Voyage of the Demeter, which came out a couple years ago,
Hmm.
also great. So we've gotten some good like
Hmm.
classic monster stuff recently.
The Last Voyage of the Demeter, I want to see just because, if for no other reason, then it's this short part of Dracula that they do from what, again, just reviews I've heard, they do a great job of just wrapping it as this unique, just shot. And I really want to see that. And to the point, slaying the monster is one of our most essential storytelling archetypes. I have a book somewhere back there. That's like the seven basic plots. And I categorize three as the plots of heroes: the quest, the voyage and the return, and overcoming the monster. James Bond even is an example of overcoming the monster because usually the villain is some kind of evil, maniacal, whatever that needs to be slain. It's
Yeah,
St. George and the Dragon, it's Beowulf. Like, all it
yeah.
takes is like adjusting the color tones essentially to turn a classic hero versus monster story into something that feels more horrific. And so I love that you clearly have an understanding of this genre because that means that you're going to write some good stuff related to that.
Yeah, I am interested in writing more horror stories as well. I also like combining them. I wrote a short story. This is actually one of the first serious things I really wrote, thinking maybe I could publish this someday, which is on the P3 Substack
Hmm.
called The Line Shack. That's like a Western
Hmm.
horror story.
Hmm.
And I have ideas for that too. The actual Old West was full of like myths and legends and like creepy stuff too. Um, and I have ideas for that I want to work with as well. So yeah, I mean, I love horror, I love westerns, I love action and adventure, I love like military stuff. So all those are genres I'm interested in writing in.
Hmm. And what's nice is because you have these varied interests, you can kind of cleanse your palate between them, trying different things. I don't know about you. I'm very intentionally taking a. I like writing Mitch Mayhew a lot, but I'm trying to make sure I'm staggering enough other things in my diet so that I'm not just feeling like I'm choking on plain fumes.
Yeah. A writer that I really admire, I've actually only read, I think, a couple of his books, but a writer that I do really admire is Ed Gorman,
Hmm.
who wrote back in the pulp paperback era, and he wrote for decades and decades and decades, and he wrote everything you can imagine. He wrote tons of westerns that are pretty good. His westerns often had like mystery plots or twists and stuff. He wrote straight mysteries. He wrote fantasy. He wrote a ton of science fiction. He wrote horror. He wrote everything. I mean, any genre. And his output was prolific. And he wrote all this different stuff. And I'm a guy that I'll be real with you. Like once I get into my like comfort groove or zone, like I like to stay there. So, I admire Ed Gorman because he's a guy that did not sit still. He wrote all sorts of different stuff, and I kind of want to do that too.
Hmm. There, it's building a body of work. Like that's the thing that I think is not really accounted for a lot of times with just any kind of creative art. I was thinking about it recently with shocking. Think of Glenn Powell and Sydney Sweeney in the same like sentence, but both of them are actors that were in a whole bunch of small things. Like there's that scene in I think it's Dark Knight Rises. Glenn Powell just has literally a line as some kind of Wall Street banker, and that's it.
Yep, he
And
does.
all it takes is that one role that really breaks them out. Looking at some research for other authors I'm going to have on the show, they've written like 15 books before I find out who they are just because it took that long for their moment to pop.
Yeah, and just talking about our business, let's be real, you and I are working with self-publishers, small publishers, stuff like that, and we're working kind of in the Amazon like sphere, which I think is great, and it's very democratic because it gives everybody kind of a chance to put their stuff out there. That is fantastic. One of the things about that though is I've done a lot of research on this. People tend to sell better on Amazon and just I think sell better in general when they have, like you said, a body of work.
Hmm.
It's like, okay, Terrence Lehue has published one book and I read it and I really like it. It's like, what else does he have? And if
Hmm.
he doesn't have anything else, I'm going to be like, okay, that was good. I'm going to move on to somebody else.
Hmm.
One of the things I do want to do is write, and I'm trying to make Killers from Yellow Rock kind of a series, is because on Amazon, series
Yes.
writers do better
Yes.
than guys that just write standalones.
Yep.
You know?
No, exactly. And I mean, that's why I immediately kicked into gear and wrote Diamonds in Denver was because I was like, I need to get at least two books there as soon as I can. And hats off to you again, because I 100% was not surprised when we were on the meeting and Veritas announced that your book was coming out too, because I'm like, I knew that Jeff is working to get this complete, and we were right about at the exact same moment. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah. You know, I was also really excited when I saw that you had something coming out. I really liked Unwanted Passenger. As much as I do keep browbeating you about putting in some cool plane gunfights and stuff, I was actually, Terrence, so I teach history and I was
Hmm.
teaching my kids about World War One in the very early days of plane gun battles when pilots first started shooting at each other, literally leaning out the cockpit with a pistol and trying to hit each other. And some of them did, which is insane.
Hmm.
And then they finally figured out, oh, we could mount guns on here and
You
then
know what
all
this
that stuff.
needs? Machine guns.
Yeah. I think all that stuff is so cool. And I was teaching about the history of like bombings, how they did like aerial reconnaissance runs over trench lines in World War One, and then they realized, oh, we could like drop stuff on them, and then that turned into like bombing doors to drop bombs on people, and it's like all that stuff is so interesting to me. And I did like Diamonds in Denver a lot.
Oh, thank you.
But man, Terrence, I keep telling you, like you have such a knowledge of like plane history and aerial combat. It's like I want to see Mitch Mayhew shooting enemy planes out of the sky, and I'm gonna keep complaining until you give it to me.
Absolutely. And hopefully the third one, the third and fourth one that I've got in mind will deliver far more of that flavor. A question I had for you for Killers from Yellow Rock. I'm not sure if you're familiar with John D. McDonald's Travis McGee series, but he
Yes.
always has like a color is the part of the title. I'm curious, is your plan with this as a series to like have a color as a part of the title?
No, actually,
Okay,
I did kind
okay.
of think about that very briefly, but no, my the title of the sequel that I'm 4 chapters into writing, and then abandoned to write Range Assassin, but I will get back to, is Gunpoint.
Ooh, ooh, I like that.
Yeah,
Titles, okay, I don't know how you feel about this. I always feel like titles are really hard. Like trying to come
yeah.
up
Oh
with
my God, yeah.
uh,
Titles are so hard, so hard.
it's when I see like a good title and someone just literally like throws it out there, I'm like, how? How did you do that?
Yeah.
Because I
Mhm.
will go through literally like three or four titles in the process of writing a story to try to get what I know is the right title for the book.
Yeah, I 100%. I struggle with titles so much. I have spent more hours than you can imagine staring at my computer screen, not about some plot detail or how should it end. Literally just staring like, what is the title of this? And I don't know. Night Horrors is an example of that. Night Horrors is I could not think of like a title like I didn't want to reference Universal directly because then I'm
Mhm.
infringing on their copyright. I have to be careful
Yes.
about that. those characters are all public domain, but Universal does have rights to like
Mm-hmm.
their designs on those characters and some of
Mm-hmm.
the ideas in their films. They
Mm-hmm.
have rights to, like, from what I understand, the whole idea of Frankenstein being resurrected by
Yeah.
lightning. Like,
Yeah.
that's not in Mary Shelley's novel. That's You have to
Correct.
be careful if you write a Frankenstein story with something like that.
Are they going to be in the public
So I was
domain
trying to figure
soon?
something out, trying to figure something out. What's that?
Are they going to be in public domain soon? Because I'm thinking through how when the
Yes, I
first
believe it's
one was
100 years.
30.
So I believe Universal's copyright runs out in like 31 on Dracula and Frankenstein.
Okay. Yeah.
And then you
Ooh.
can officially use the Boris Karloff like makeup design.
Mm-hmm.
There's already so many generic versions out there, but again, if you
Yeah.
pay attention, they often change it just a little bit. They'll change like where the scar is, or they change where the bolts are, so that Universal technically can't sue them. But yeah, I ended up just calling it Night Horrors. I don't think it's a terrible title, but I also don't really love it as a title. I think it's kind of generic, but I was just like, eh, it's
But
October. We got to get this out here. Night
yeah,
Horrors. Here we
yeah.
go.
I think that's one of the things that I'm working on next year is being much more. I think that this year kind of took me by surprise with writing and
Yeah.
publishing,
Oh yeah,
where
me too.
next year, um, I I want to sit down and go, okay, these are the books I know that I'm working on and will be published. These are the time frames. Here's my schedule to write them. Here's my schedule to promote them. Here is like, let's lay this out with intention on the calendar.
Yeah, that's the thing is right. You don't want to end up being a George R. R. Martin who, you know, eh, people criticize him and then other people defend him. I'll just say, like, if he has writer's block or he's having trouble, I'm not going to attack him for that. What I will say, I think he deserves a lot of criticism for is the fact that he keeps telling people, I'm going to have the book out by X date. And then
Hmm.
X date goes by, and then it's been 10 years of that or whatever it's been. And it's like, I don't even read his books. I've not read any of the Fire and Ice books, but it's like, don't keep telling people that you're going to release your book if you can't make the deadline. Yeah. I certainly don't want to fall into that. And so I think it's good that you have like a plan in place and like very kind of specific time frames. And I should probably do the same thing.
Well, I'm excited for this next year. I'm excited to see what you write. I'm excited to see what I write. I'm
Yeah.
always excited to see what I write. But it is fun to do this, and it's just such a privilege. Like we get to have so much fun writing these stories, and not to champion Veritas brand too much, but I really like working with them, and you have
Yeah.
been really great to read your books too.
Yeah, I like working with them. I like what they're doing. I love talking to the guys on the Discord and stuff. I've said this in my podcasts with Ryan, but like I went looking for that because, like I said, I was a big fan of H.P. Lovecraft.
Hmm.
And H.P. Lovecraft talked to other like pulp writers of the day all the time. They
Hmm.
would talk, they would trade stories, they would give
He
each other
was
feedback, and I went
friends with
looking for
Robert E.
that.
Howard.
Yeah, Robert E. Howard, August Derleth, all those guys. And I went looking for that. I wanted to find a group of other kind of like young up on the come authors and
Hmm.
who could give me feedback. I could give them feedback and we could talk and exchange ideas. And I found that with the Discord and the Veritas crew. And so yeah, I'm very happy about that.
Hmm. So, what about coming up with character names? Do you have a structure or process for that? Because that was one of the things that reading Killers from Yellow Rock, just as I read the story, because there is more characters, are more characters is the correct sentence. At least I correct my own grammar, not just other people's. But the coming up with different character names, especially when they're set in the Old West, do you have like a method, a rubric, or do you try to like capture this is like who should have been in this area, these types of names, or is it just, oh, that name sounds really cool?
I do a few things. So names, kind of like titles, is another thing where historically I've been like, what's this guy's name? I don't know. I know everything about him. I know what his character is. I know what I want him to do, but giving him a name, it's like, fuck, what is his name? I don't know. But what I came up with was, first of all, I've stolen a lot of names just from like my friends.
Yes.
There's these two henchmen and killers from Yellow Rock named DeRusso and Lanciani. Two of
Yes.
my best friends, their last names are DeRusso and Lanciani. I wholesale stole their names. Didn't ask them for permission either. I was just like, yeah, I'm doing this. Too bad. Wayne Roberts, one of my good friends is named Wayne. I have another friend whose last name is Roberts, so I just combined their names. Um, but more commonly, a little trick I've found that I'll share with you is I watch a lot of old films, old westerns,
Hmm.
old horror movies, all sorts of stuff. I love classic cinema. I'll look at the credits or I'll go to Wikipedia, look at
Hmm.
the credits, and I'll find people's names. And again, I'll take like a first name and I'll find someone else's last name. So I'm not taking a
Hmm.
real person's name
Yeah.
and I'll just combine them. And if it sounds good, I'll be like, that's the guy's name now.
Yeah. I mean, perfect. Uh, I'm writing a story set in medieval England at this time, so I've in the like 14 whatevers. So I like looked up what are the names of the barons, and I just started playing the mix and match around. But it's just coming up with the right name sometimes does take work. And quite honestly, again, I think you did a great job in expressing this the vastness of the West, because I don't want to say range again, with the different character names you chose.
Thank you. Yeah. Some of them are based on real people. Coyotero, the Indian bounty hunter in that book, he's based on a real person who I have tried to find so much information about and can't. There was a real life Apache bounty hunter named Coyotero. And Coyotero is the name of an Apache tribe. So I'm not clear if that was actually his name or if that's just what people called him, if that's what he called himself. I don't know. We have very little written records about this guy, except that he was killed in a gunfight with another bounty hunter where he tried to claim a bounty after a major range war happened. And I found that story so interesting, and so I just made my own Indian bounty hunter named Coyotero, who's very different than the real life documented historical one. But I just took the name and the concept and kind of did my own thing with it.
And again, it works beautifully. I had a blast reading both of these books.
Thank you.
I think that, yeah, I want to make sure I wasn't losing my mind. Will Adams is the name of the main gunfighter here. And again,
Yep.
it just, if you were to ask me what is a perfect Western character name, Will Adams, I immediately see like a character on Bonanza in my head.
So that name actually came from, so the last name Adams came from Chris Adams, who is Yul Brynner's character in The Magnificent Seven, who is one of
Ah,
my favorite screen heroes of all time. Magnificent Seven is my third favorite film of all time. And then Will, I don't know, I think I probably just pulled that out of a hat and was like, oh, that sounds good.
well, it does sound really good. Jeff, this has been a great conversation. Where can people go to learn more about you and your work?
So, people want to learn more about my work, they can find all my books on Amazon. Just type in Jeff or Jeffrey Pintabona, they'll all come up. I also do have a Substack.
Hmm.
Again, type in my name on Substack and you will find me there. I've only just started posting and writing stuff, but
Hmm.
I am trying to keep that updated as well. I'm also a contributor to the Pulp, Pipe, and Poetry Substack.
Hmm.
So you can find articles and short stories by me on there. And you can also join the Men's Adventure Fiction Discord.
Hmm.
Terrence is in there. I'm in there. There's a ton of other fantastic writers in there. And you can feel free to jump in there and join the conversation.
Awesome. I will link all of that in the show notes. Jeff, it's been a pleasure. Thanks again for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me, Terrence. It's always a pleasure.